Please welcome Airtable CEO Howie Liu and Coatue Management General Partner Caryn Marooney.
Oh, thank you. I get the desk.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I know. Hello.
Hi.
Hey. Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. I love the desk. I feel very much like a talk show host all of a sudden. I'm going to try to make the most of this. You're far away, though.
I know. I feel like I'm here for office hours.
Okay.
But I've been the disobedient student.
Will do.
Yeah.
My name is Caryn. I am a general partner at Coatue. I've worked for many years in different companies. I was at Facebook for many years, Salesforce, VMware. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Howie for many, many years. I'm sure most of you use Airtable, so I don't need to go into very much here, but for those that don't, Airtable is a connected apps platform. So think of it like an entire organization can move as one when you use Airtable. So whether or not, I think it's, 80% of the Fortune 100 use Airtable. Mm-hmm. So whether they're designing shoes, I can guess who that is, blockbuster movies, or helping to make sure that vaccines are distributed, Airtable is there to solve that. But today we're here to talk about how you scale in the enterprise. Because I know it feels like just yesterday we were talking about this, that you just started, and now you've scaled up and we've learned a bunch of lessons along the way.
From Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, club organizations using Airtable, and cattle farmers to now big Fortune 500s. I think it's definitely been a journey.
So we have 5 lessons from Howie on how to scale and how you think about these lessons as you go up market. So first off, let me jump to the first one. We're going to talk about foundations. So a lot of this is, what are the fundamental things that you need to build, and how do you sequence them? Like Mark Zuckerberg used to say to me all the time, knowing the big vision is easy, but sequencing it is really hard. So how have you thought about some of the foundational work and the sequencing of what you do when, as you've been building Airtable?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this is having really clear conviction about what the market is that you're going after. I think there's kind of 2 ways to build a company. One is you build something very quickly, you kind of see if it sticks. If it doesn't, you move on. And some companies can be built that way, right? Twitter was a hack project that happened through a pivot of the previous version of the company, and it clearly took off and worked, right? Whereas something like a SpaceX, of course, you can't just iterate your way into probably rockets that don't blow up. And I think with Airtable, it was much more premeditated. I had the chance to work at Salesforce after it acquired a previous company I founded, and in just seeing the potential of the low-code space from pretty early on, like I think in the 2011-12 timeframe, and recognizing the power of what if you could make an app platform that anyone could use and configure to their own needs. I think we had pretty clear focus on this opportunity, and then it made it easier to break that down into, okay, what are the biggest things we need to de-risk? And so the first version of our product actually was a prototype, purely UX focused. So we created a front end and I think initially wireframes and then an interactive prototype, and completely faked the back end, because even though there was a lot of technical complexity there, we knew we would have to go and build this real-time relational database engine. The first starting point was just, if we can't distill these UX concepts into something that's really intuitive that anyone can pick up and just start building with, then it's kind of dead on arrival. So we just, I think we were very deliberate about figuring out what are the key unlocks to de-risk this opportunity. And you could follow that all the way through our 10 years of existence to now. It's really about seeing if we can go into more and more complex, large-scale enterprise deployments, and going wall to wall, becoming this connected apps platform where it's not just one-off apps that are created, but really a whole network of them. And that's the thing we're really betting on now. So I think at every point, knowing what is the next milestone to de-risk the bigger next frontier of the company's potential. And
it's cool because you probably can see it, but then you still have to figure out, okay, I need to go backwards and then figure out what are the steps.
Yeah, and I think that is the constant dilemma, I think, emotionally as an operator, is you want to have this charisma and vision and excitement about what the company could be, right? If you're just always stuck in the here and now and like what's going to happen tomorrow, you don't have the the aspiration or you don't see where the company can be. And this is probably the hard part about early stage investing, right? Is you have to be able to squint and see past what a 1-year-old or even a 1-month-old company is today, but what it could be. At the same time, as an operator especially, you have to execute, and you can't be too head in the clouds. And so I think that's one of the unspoken challenges of the journey is like to maintain that duality of vision and like where do we want to get towards in 5 years, but then be super executionally focused on like what are the details of what we need to build now. And for us, a lot of it is just like the nitty-gritty mechanics of enterprise sales and success and making sure our product roadmap is aligned to support the needs of these more really sophisticated deployments.
Yeah, I mean, I think people underestimate how important executing in the short term is to get to the long term.
For sure.
Which sort of throws into the second lesson I just want to run to. This one I find intriguing, where you talk about choosing your competitors and making a conscious decision there. And I find that interesting because I think there's this fallacy that people are saying, well, I have this set of competitors, I don't get to choose them. And I think particularly when you're creating a category, which is something that Airtable has done, you have more say in who you compete with than I think people perhaps realize. And like, what was your journey there, especially as you thought about like, well, what is this category and how do I do that? Yeah,
I think this comes back to this framing of like, the short term versus long term, or even like, the outside in look at the company. So, objectively, investors or analysts are going to assess your competitive landscape in a way that you don't have full control over. Obviously, you can, try to pitch your company in a certain way, but ultimately, other people are going to put you in a certain box, and you can't control that in the near term. However, as operators, you do have control over how you execute and the choices you make from a go-to-market standpoint. Which accounts are you prioritizing? What types of product functionality are you prioritizing to serve a certain segment of the customer base? And so I think over a multi-year time horizon, you can say, our aspiration is actually to move out of this space, in our case, of productivity. We knew when we launched that there was a very good chance we would be bucketed in with, at the time, it was companies like Trello, or even before that, like Wunderlist, these like task management companies, productivity tools, right? Or even, Google Sheets and Excel, spreadsheets. But it was our very, very intentional focus to not be stuck in that, kind of lower end, more tactical, use cases category, but instead to push towards what we believed was the much bigger, especially enterprise opportunity around building real apps, robust apps that actually could scale up very high in terms of complexity. So we use this concept of Airtable being both low floor, so very easy to adopt and use. Low floor. Yep. And then also high ceiling. Okay. And I think when we launched, the truth is like we were low floor, but like maybe medium ceiling. And so understandably we were perceived as sometimes a spreadsheet plus plus. But because we made these deliberate choices to push more and more up complexity, we've been able to raise that ceiling and align a lot of our go-to-market efforts as well to go into the more serious enterprise multi-million-dollar deployments.
Yeah, I do. I think that changes who you compete with along the way. Yeah,
I mean, it was for us, going from, productivity tools and, kind of lightweight project management to now really, we want to position ourselves against the Salesforce App Clouds and ServiceNow deployments out there. So really robust applications within large enterprises that now, can be built in a much more agile and connected way with Airtable.
And you had to earn the right to do that, which you did with the other successes that you went along. It was one of those, like, it was an earning along the way to have a different competitor set. And I think that was an important part of it, too.
Sequencing is so important. And, I think had we launched out of the gates talking about, taking on, let's say, ServiceNow, it would have been a little bit ludicrous, right? Like it would have, just gone completely, I think, over our customers or reporters or, investors' heads, because the gap was too wide. But I think that's also where having, as the operator, the clarity of like, we know we're going to get to here in 3 years. We know in, 3, or in our case, like it took, 10 years to get to where we are today from founding. But we know that's where we want to go. And yet, at the same time, every year we can go out and be very, very focused about what we need to do just this year, instead of pretending like we're already at year 9 or 10, when we're not.
There's this saying, people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and drastically underestimate what they can do in 10. And I think that's part of it. So the next lesson, you and I talk a lot about this, but this is I love the way you say this, shrink your TAM. So Airtable is a horizontal platform. It can do anything. That is beautiful. That is wonderful. It is a huge TAM. That is a feature, and it's a bug.
Yep.
Especially when you're starting out.
Yeah.
So how have you thought about this, given the TAM is infinite?
It is, yeah. It is a blessing and a curse. I feel like in my earlier time starting Airtable, or even the company I briefly worked on before Airtable, I was always very paranoid about not having a big enough TAM. And I recall even in high school or college when I was thinking about doing startups, and just dreaming up different ideas. I would always get really worried, like, oh, this idea isn't big enough. I want to do something that is like a really, really big opportunity. I don't just want to build, a small piece of software for like a very niche use case. And I think that, there's a healthy, basis for that paranoia, right? Like, you don't want to wedge yourself into too small of a market. But I think you can end up on the other extreme, which is you have such a big market that you can't tackle it all at once, right? So if our bigger, like multi-decade-long opportunity is to democratize software creation for everyone, and in particular, create useful apps within every company that are built and managed by the line of business themselves, like people who are actually doing their jobs, building marketing campaigns or launching products, like they're the ones who should be building their own apps. That is a massive opportunity, right? I mean, certainly like multi-deca-billion revenue opportunity, but it's so big that it doesn't actually give you that much guidance on where to focus your efforts. And so I think what we've learned is, like sometimes you actually need to shrink your TAM. That sounds so like
counterintuitive.
Wrong. It sounds very wrong to say. I feel like there's probably some
it's like
business
jumbo
school,
shrimp.
yeah,
like
cheat sheet that's like do not do not do this. But it's true, and I think in our case, an example of how we've been doing this is, the truth is, like, we have very heterogeneous adoption. Like, there's almost every industry, country, company size.
You were saying
like
cows and
cattle farmers,
and
to like managing fashion retail companies and like product launches and so on.
So I used to joke, and you make coffee.
Yeah.
Like you could do anything.
Right. That feature is coming maybe in the future. Yeah, you need the add-on espresso attachment. It's an upsell. But there's such a broad market, like company size segments. The use cases, what function we sell into, and we've already been pooled into this really heterogeneous base of adoption. Like, we see organic usage across all these different types of use cases, but it makes it really hard from a product and a go-to-market standpoint to actually focus our efforts and make sure we're providing the best possible experience, or that we are repeatedly marketing and selling to our best possible customers. And so what we've done is, while maintaining the horizontality, if that's a word, of the underlying platform, we always want to make sure the platform is more like a Lego experience where you can build anything you want with it. Yet at the same time, Legos don't just sell as a bunch of random pieces. They also sell the boxes that have, here's the castle one, here's the farm one, Star Wars, great one, the Millennium Falcon.
Yep.
But you can buy these packaged kits, and so I think we're also identifying, hey, it turns out a lot of companies are using Airtable for product road mapping and product operations, tracking their user feedback and triaging that. And if we can do that really, really well for a few customers, why can't we go and repeatedly market and sell and also build the product to be the best possible experience for every other customer that might have that need, right? And so kind of creating vertical edges on top of a horizontal platform has given us this much sharper focus, and we've seen the results speak for themselves, like being able to much more easily sell into the same use case, same buyer type again and again and again, and make sure that our product is actually delivering on those needs. It's just a much easier way to execute than trying to be all things to all people.
And you can really say, like, you are the best at this.
Right.
Like, it is such an amazing thing to know, like, this is, and to focus the teams.
Yeah. Yeah, and going back to the choosing your competitors, it allows you to then actually put yourself up against the competitors for that subcategory. So, you know, for instance, in the product operations use case, we're actually competing against vertical specific, you know, product planning tools out there. And so being able to actually, you know, position ourselves against them and really test our own mettle of, you know, how good are we actually for this use case. I mean, obviously, we're a very great horizontal platform. We have all the relational database and the low-code functionality to be a really great, you know, best-in-breed low-code app platform. But on top of that, can we be the best-in-breed, you know, vertical solution for this use case or that use case?
And I think it's interesting because you are this connected apps platform, you bring the benefit of that to what you're now focused on. So it's important where you started, because it has all of the benefits of being able to be connected in this next focus.
I think that's, you know, this is kind of a lesson that organically emerged for us over the 10 years we've been working on Airtable. But I think the best kind of strategy, you know, comes from the fusion of, you know, what's organically already working. Like, you don't have to go and, you know, push, you know, a rock uphill, right?
Yeah.
There's something already working for us that was, you know, finding these use cases that were repeatably and organically emerging across our customer base, creating deep, deep value for enterprises, and also that, you know, these enterprises were looking to, you know, then build out other apps that were adjacent to it. So, for instance, you know, with a lot of the content production companies out there, like Netflix, you know, there's this, you know, central production workflow, and then all these adjacent things related to that. And so the idea of being able to connect all of those, you know, work streams together with shared sources of truth, you know, is how we kind of decided to lean into this idea of connected apps and making that our North Star. At the same time, you know, when we look at it kind of top down or outside in, we also recognize this is a great strategic advantage for us, right? Like, we can start with one use case. We don't have to stop there. We can actually gain these network effects and actually compound our value within an enterprise because we allow the company to build other apps adjacent to it, and they all kind of interconnect and work well together. So, you know, we do need to or want to be the best-in-breed product for any one use case, but then we have this asymmetric advantage as we build out use cases around it because, you know, we just connect those use cases more seamlessly together than you would get with disparate tools or if it was all in spreadsheets or anywhere else.
Yeah, and you always say, like, listen to your customers. Like, they'll tell you a lot if you listen.
And you have to ask the right questions, too.
Right, right. So in terms of the go-to-market strategy, you hear these sort of two different sides. There's product-led growth and there's enterprise sales. And it's like, choose. Now, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah.
Is it a choice? Is it, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know, 10 years ago when we were going out and raising our first round of funding, seed round, you know, we ended up raising, I think, a $3 million round, which seemed like a lot of money at the time, at a $6 million pre, so, you know, it was a different time. You know, but I remember, like, all of the investors that we talked to who were knowledgeable about SaaS, almost all of them, you know, frame this as a, you know, kind of a choice. Like, are you going to be more of this, like, consumer viral thing that maybe looks like Dropbox? I mean, Slack hadn't even launched at the time. And there really weren't that many examples of B2B serving companies that had, like, this product-led virality. Or are you going to do, like, kind of real enterprise sales, right? Yeah. And then forget about choose. And I think a lot of that is based on, you know, you like most people, whether, you know, you're an operator or an investor, you know, you kind of ground your mental models based on historical, you know, data points, right?
Yeah.
And you know, in 2012, there just weren't that many data points of companies, you know, that had really fused PLG with enterprise sales. I mean, today with Figma's announced acquisition by Adobe for $20 billion, I think, you know, there's more and more validation that, like, getting this combination right is a real thing and can, you know, result in profound benefits from a sales efficiency standpoint, from a, you know, just a business model standpoint. So I think what we've tried to do is not see those as divergent poles, but really try to find the bridge to connect the two. So as a very tangible example, we've started to experiment with cold outbound efforts, right? In the early days of Airtable, we were purely inbound, just organic adoption. People would pull out credit cards, and then Airtable would spread virally within a company.
Which is pretty sweet.
It's awesome. It's like free money. Like people are just coming to you and like throwing cash at you for like shipping bits over the internet to them, right? They give us their bits, we ship back those bits in kind of collaborative form, and we get paid for it. It's great. But what we also found was that in some cases, especially for the larger companies, like they wanted some more hand-holding. They wanted to talk to a sales person and eventually a success person. And as we leaned into that motion, we found that the power of the product, like the fact that the product was so delightful, was intuitive, and actually was something that empowered the lines of business as opposed to being something that was very just purely centrally deployed and managed only, was actually still a really, really huge advantage in even like the more human-led sales or success efforts. So finding that bridge between the two, and even when we are now going, and experimenting with increasingly, cold outbound, so actually reaching out to customers that don't have, much or any organic usage of Airtable, we're finding that the delightfulness of the product, the fact that they can actually go and not take our word for the value of the product, but take it over and try it out for themselves in minutes, is still a huge advantage. So really finding a way to leverage the PLG with the enterprise sales and vice versa, make sure that as you invest into the product and improve its functionality, that you're also considering, well, how do we serve the needs of customers that are doing more than just small scale self-serve things, but actually managing this at scale.
Yeah.
It requires effort on both sides or in both directions. But if done well, I think you can actually build an extraordinary business. And frankly, I think it's probably where the future of all enterprise software is eventually moving towards.
I did a post about how it's the hamburger go-to-market, where the product is the meat and it's both buns. It was like very simplified. But I do believe that they're important. You can't just have one if you're going to reach your full potential. So
For sure.
I find it really interesting. But it's hard, again, to sequence it. So it goes back to timing and what you do first. And you can't do it all right off the bat. Like you do start from one area or the other.
It's also unfamiliar territory, right? I mean, the case studies for this are being written as we speak. And it's much easier to kind of stick to an older model. We're going to just do classic top-down enterprise sales. Like there is a playbook for that. The big enterprise software companies have been doing it for decades. But also, at the same time, like I think that model is going to become increasingly, maybe not obsolete, but just it's going to be increasingly outdated relative to this new, product-led approach, right?
Yeah.
And so almost by definition, I think any playbook that's like already tried and true for too long might be at the risk of becoming irrelevant or just inefficient relative to like this newer approach that you have to pioneer a little bit.
And because you started with the organic product-led, you have the hooks into iteration on the product connected to sales that I think is quite helpful as you connect with that top bun or the enterprise sales. Like that's already in your DNA.
Yeah. I think I've come to really appreciate that both are real crafts. I mean, doing enterprise sales well is a craft of its own.
It is a craft.
We use the MEDIC, framework for sales, and I've just been really, really impressed at the efforts that our sales team has put into like building this playbook, refining it, making it really efficient and scalable. And that is a craft in its own right, in the same way that building great product that has consumer grade UX is great. But I do think. Net, like it's probably harder to retrofit, delightful, bottoms-up adoptable or PLG, adoptable product, after the fact than it is to figure out how to start with self-serve adoption, PLG, and then layer in enterprise sales. So if you are going to sequence, I think it's, it's finding that PLG product market fit is really foundational, and it gives you so much leverage then in anything that you want to layer on from an enterprise sales standpoint.
And it helps you listen to more customers. because you
Totally.
you have them. You have
Yeah,
more.
it's almost like doing drug discovery when you already have a petri dish that's massive and you see lots of little pockets of, here's penicillin, like actually taking action on bacteria. Like you just have a much larger organic sample size to deal with. And for us, like it made the job of discovering what are the best use cases for Airtable, what are the best company types, who should be our ICP, much easier because we didn't have to invent it on first principles. We just got to look at it empirically and see, oh, these customers are real enterprise logos. They're really getting high value from Airtable. They built these use cases themselves. We don't know anything about, let's say, global marketing, campaigns and marketing for major product launches at like a Fortune 500 company, especially when we were, bright-eyed, entrepreneurs just working in Silicon Valley, who didn't know anything about that world. But I think getting to see our customers build on top of the platform we had created allowed us to learn from them and partner with them almost to see, okay, how do we make our product an even better experience for that, and then scale up around that, that product market fit that's already working.
And this leads into our last lesson, which is this sense of don't underestimate the importance of a delightful experience in an enterprise product. And I've seen a lot of SaaS products, and I think that a lot of times the UI or the UX is an afterthought because it's got great functionality, but my eyeballs are kind of bleeding, but that's cool, it'll be all right. And you've had a consumer sort of DNA that has been very useful and a real sensibility about creating delight. How do you manage that with the complexity of the enterprise?
It's certainly not easy, and I wouldn't even say that I certainly wouldn't say that we're perfect at it. We are learning as we go. I think part of the challenge is when you do have a low floor, high ceiling product, you can be great for low floor use cases because your product is intuitive and delightful, et cetera. But the things that you need to do to be a great product at at higher levels of complexity, at greater scale, if you have thousands of people using the product, and with much more complex data schemas and business processes and the types of logic and interfaces that people are trying to build within their apps are just more complex. It's not even a matter of it's not just a matter of having a delightful product experience in terms of UX. It's also a matter of making sure that we have the right frameworks and tooling to allow these more complex deployments to be managed at scale, right? To prevent things from becoming chaos.
Yeah.
If you think about a product like, let's say, Google Sheets, I would say it's actually pretty intuitive to start using. You could just type in text or numbers into any cell. You can create a formula, et cetera. But then we've all probably experienced the really messy, overgrown sheet, and Sheets and Excel break down much earlier than Airtable does because we actually have kind of the app platform foundations. We have a relational database. You can scale up a more complex workflow, but it still takes a lot of very intentional investment from us to make sure that we keep scaling with our customers, and now can support, ecosystems of apps being built within the enterprise. So I don't know if there's a silver bullet there, and it's, it requires a lot of the hard blocking and tackling of, of actually, deciding what's the product roadmap and what are the trade-offs that you're willing to make in terms of where you, bet your resources. But I think that it's about kind of pushing on that tension and not saying it's one or the other, but really striving to uphold, this delightful, intuitive entry point, that low floor, holding the ground, if not making even more progress on that, while at the same time enabling a higher and higher and higher ceiling and a bridge between the two, really, so that it's very elegant for a customer to come in, start building a very simple use case in Airtable, maybe get a data set in there, create a shareable interface and create a workflow around that, share that within 15 minutes. But if they want to build it up and make it more and more complex over time, we need to support them along that journey and have better features and tooling to allow them to progress to much larger deployments and more complex deployments with grace.
It's awesome. Well, those were our 5 lessons. Do you have anything we didn't cover, last minute thoughts?
I think the most important thing too is it is a very, I think we're all humans, and as much as, SaaS businesses can get distilled into metrics, and everybody talks about revenue and numbers, and Rule of 40 and NDRs, and obviously those are very important metrics of the health and success of businesses in our industry. But I also think there's so much human agency involved in the journey, right?
Yeah.
And going back to the original point about balancing that duality of where's the North Star, where do you want to go to, who do you want to compete with, versus what are the realities of today. I think it's also really important to just kind of be kind to ourselves, and I'm sure everyone in this room has had ups and downs, and it's a hard job.
It's a hard job.
Every job in SaaS can be very, very challenging, and so I think patting ourselves on the back every once in a while, it's something that I've learned to do more and more over time, is recognize the wins and kind of appreciate that we've gotten to where we are through the very human efforts and very intentional efforts of a lot of very motivated and hardworking people that are part of the team. So and hopefully have fun along the way, right? Because life is too short to even if it's a tough effort, and what we're trying to do requires a lot of intensity, and it can be stressful. If we don't have joy and passion about not just the end state but also the journey, then I think it makes it all a lot less motivating and meaningful. So,
terrific. Thank you, Howie. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. That's it.